Welcome to the Albany Pine Bush Preserve Commission's quarterly board meeting. My name is Keith Gertz. I'm the Regional Director for DEC's Region 4, and I also serve as the board chair. The first thing we always do is go around the table to introduce the Executive Director as well as the rest of the board members. So I'll get started with that. To my left is the Executive Director, Chris Hauber. Representing Town of Gilliland, Peter Barber. Citizen Rep, Harvey Alexander. Citizen Rep, Stephen Rice. Citizen Rep, John Brust. And we have Mr. Glass, Brad Glass from City of Albany, representing the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, Elaine Ginny-Ball, and also with Nancy Pearson, another Citizen Rep, and representing the Town of Colony, Mike Tangler. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. The first item on the agenda is to consider the minutes from the last board meeting. Can I have a motion to consider those minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Okay, now we'll open the floor to anyone from the public who would like to say a few things.
You get organized here. I brought the Friends annual report for 2018, and I just wanted to share it with everybody. I don't know where to stand in this room because
Stand up by the screen.
Okay, so while you're passing it around, I just want to say we could use another board member, so if anybody knows somebody retiring or who just has extra time, that doesn't sound possible. But we would love to have somebody interested in helping with the Friends on a different level. The annual report, some of the interesting things, the Truex Cemetery that you've heard about and saw a video on before. Our traveling exhibit we introduced in 2018. It's been to 4 different libraries. Spent about 6 months altogether in the field. Coming up with Bethlehem in a couple months, and we're looking for more venues for that. The science lectures that we're really proud of, and tonight there's one on fire. Jesse, are you going to be there? I think we'll have some people there from the staff. That should be really good. Ticks next month is going to be really popular. Not that ticks are popular, but we're all afraid of them. The interns is another feature, and the ticket to ride, which the numbers there were kind of down, and we were concerned about that. It was $289 for 2018, so I didn't feature it. Typical communications kind of person. But we're already almost to 500, and it's only March for 2019. So things have turned around. So that's all I wanted to say, and if you find a board member, push them our direction.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you, Richard.
Is there anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Tom Romano, and I live on Kings Road in the town of Colony. And I've lived there for 46 years. I relocated from Long Island, and the point I was trying to make is that the pine barrens here, there's so much similarity between coastal pine barrens that we had on Long Island and what we have right here, inland pine barrens. So part of what I'd like to comment on is the restoration project on Curry Road. I'd like to commend the commission on the work that's been done there. It looks terrific. And in addition to that, I'd encourage the commission, whenever they can, to acquire more property. I'd like to see more connectivity between plots that the commission already has. And, potentially, you might be able to link up with the Woodlawn Preserve, which would really be nice. Other than that, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to stand up and say that again?
No, it's always great to hear positive feedback. It really is.
Nope.
I'm his better half, Helen Romano, and I also live on Kings Road. And I want to commend you on educating the kids, because the kids are the future. that's going to hold Pine Bush together when we're no longer here. And I'd like to see as much done as you can to encourage all kinds of activities for these youth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move forward to reports. The only thing I was going to report, and I don't know, Neil, if you're going to talk about it at all, I know you've been working with our permanent staff with regards to getting a permit to move the sand. You've been in contact with the Army Corps. Is that going to be touched on during the technicals?
Yes.
Okay, so then I have nothing to report. And is there any of the board members have anything they'd like to say? Okay, I'll turn it over to Chris then.
Okay, a few things I'll point out in the update, but I'd always point you to the update to make sure you go through it and see all the good things the staff have been up to in the last quarter. And it's just a snapshot. Obviously, there's a lot more that we do. One thing I'd like to do is I'd point out Jody Nash. Jody Nash is our new volunteer and community engagement specialist, which is kind of a revamped position of the one that we had. Jody celebrated her 5th year, 4th. So Jody started with us and she was a visitor services associate at the front desk for a number of years. And now she's working in this role, which is the position that ties directly into the audience development plan and our constituent-centered focus. So Jody's out there listening to what people have to say and kind of bringing it back to us and help us try and figure out how we can better resonate with the work that we do with the people that live next to us. Richard from the Friends Group mentioned the traveling photo exhibit that they have. That's a subset of the photos from the juried photo exhibit that we do every year. We started it early this year. We're actually accepting photos now, and we'll do that primarily through November. Does that sound right? I think it's through November. So we started really early so we get even more photos. And it's a little self-serving because we get great photos from a lot of people, and we get to use them. So it helps us with our social media and things like that. The new Fact Finders Lab, which is a temporary exhibit that is now open in the Carner classroom. The education and other staff, there's a whole committee that have worked on that for a number of months to put it together. It opened just a couple of weeks ago, so when you go downstairs before you go out, take a look. It's a really nice exhibit. It's already brought in a number of people. A few other updates. Lupin Fests 2019. Our annual Lupin Festival is May 18th. I can pass these around. These are postcards that will be going out. In the past couple of years, we've had, pending good weather, we have about 2,000 attendees, which is great. Another date, which I probably should have done this the other way because it's backwards. April 27th is our annual Earth Day event. And that's hosted in conjunction with the Friends Group, the Friends of the Pine Bush community. They're actually purchasing shirts. Everybody who comes gets a t-shirt. And then the Nature Conservancy is partnering with us as well. And the Nature Conservancy is providing refreshments for that day. And Earth Day this year will focus on always the inglorious aspect of roadside cleanup, but it's really important. Jackie Citronetti and Jesse Hoffman are our point people here in the commission working on that. We're also doing more glorious things like planting, split rail fence replacement and installation, water bar installation. Am I missing anything else? Sound about right? Okay. So if you're interested, you have to sign up. Our sign-ups are looking pretty good. And as always, we have good weather, we have tons of people. If we have bad weather, we have 50. So, and one other, just the final thing, there's one thing I'd like to point you to, but I'm not going to go into it, about a blue jay that we, as part of our bird banding program here in the fall and summer migrations, that we banded, that was found 2 years later in Maine and reported back. We got the information back. I'd like you to read that because it's pretty interesting. And finally, Tyler Briggs, you're going to hear from him about our fire program, but Tyler served as a host for us for the commission for 2 days worth of meetings. Last week, the DEC asked us to host called Landfire. Landfire, in a quick summary, is basically using satellite imagery to identify fire events, prescribed fire or wildfires, throughout this meeting was Region 9 of the Forest Service, which goes, think of the coast to Maine, to Pennsylvania, to Minnesota. It's a big region. So we had a lot of people here exposed to the work that we do, so that was great. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Neil, with an update on the technical committee?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Happy second day of spring. I forgot my prop downstairs, so Dylan was kind enough to go and snag this for me. I was told it. I don't have a written report for you. This quarter, the committee met once, but it was on projects you've already seen, so I hopefully saved you a little bit of paper to carry back and recycle. So there are 2 projects that I wanted to update you on. One, of course, is the landfill habitat mitigation project. And we had the annual interagency habitat management team meeting here earlier this week, Monday. And that's with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, DEC, the commission, the city, and their private consultants, Applied Ecological Services in Clough Harbor. And here's the landfill, obviously. And they're working on restoring, and they've largely done with a little over 100 acres outside of the landfill. And the next stage of things is to begin restoring the landfill itself. One of the stumbling blocks has been getting a wetland permit modification from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in order to get the sand that they stockpiled along Rep Road up to the landfill to begin initiating that restoration of the landfill itself, the oldest part of the landfill, the GAL, as it's known. And the meeting went well, and after it's been more than a year since we last met with the Army Corps, but the Corps indicated at the meeting on Monday that they will be issuing a permit to be able to put a culvert in on a ditch to install a haul road so that the city can move the sand up to the landfill without taking their trucks on the highway on Rap Road, which was great news. And then yesterday I received a letter from the department, from DEC, also indicating that they are approving the construction of that haul road to be able to facilitate that project. So that's great news. So the next stage of things, the work around the landfill is largely done. There's one small project, little upland area that they're going to be planting this spring. All the rest of the work there is done outside of basically invasive species management and ecological monitoring, wildlife, plants, hydrology, and now they'll start putting sand at the landfill. It's going to be in phases, so it's probably going to take about 5 years to do the GAL itself. Stabilizing the sand is the biggest issue. So they'll start basically ringing the GAL at the toe of the slope, get that sand in, get it stabilized, get it planted, hopefully this year. Next year, mid-slope, year after that, the top of the slope. One of the things we learned from the test plots, if you remember at the top of the GAL, that kind of saddle the oldest part of the landfill, where they had some serious issues with erosion. Didn't help that the sand was placed there right before Sandy hit. And so it was going to be an extreme event, but still it was clear that if we don't get the sand stabilized quickly, it really becomes a problem. So that's all great news. That project is moving forward, and I look forward to not only seeing the landfill covered in native plants and providing some sense of habitat and continuity between Carter Barrens East and the Rat Barrens, but also they are planning at the very tip top of the active landfill now, when they're done and they close the landfill in roughly 2026, that there will be effectively a fire tower or a pavilion, an educational pavilion with trail access. It'll be the best view in the Pine Bush. It really being able to see downtown as well as seeing all of the preserves. So that was a really good meeting, and it went well, and it was relatively short. The second project I wanted to update you on, if you remember at the last quarterly meeting, I briefed you on the project over at Crossgates and their proposal in partial protection area 57 for apartment buildings. I met with Jim Seuss, their CEO, earlier in the week, and it's looking, I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to strike an appropriate balance and potentially mitigate most significant negative impacts of this proposal with a modified proposal that I believe they'll be submitting to the town. So that meeting also went very well. I'm optimistic that will land in a place that provides some environmental protection while still ensuring that they can do what they want to do with their property. The devil's always in the detail, but I don't get optimistic very often, if you know me.
I was just trying to orient myself to the
Yep.
project. The blue part, That's where if you go in like Best Buy and you see the big fencing, that's the old, it was
Yes.
NIMO or something, that
Right,
land?
yep, National Grid, so it used to be called the Butterfly Corral. So when the theater expansion went in and they needed a stormwater management permit, a Speedies permit, that Speedies permit expanded the area that's basically protected that Crossgates owns, that DEC manages, and we kind of consult with DEC. We're working on finalizing an updated management plan for that, but that's the blue area, Steve.
Okay.
Is the hill is here and the power line runs here.
Okay, and then that pink, the habitat of that pink zone is mixed forest now? Is that-
It's where they've been dumping yard waste and things. It's old, mostly cottonwood and aspen. There are some small openings in it. Yep.
And the thing to point out with it is partial protection, the pink area where they're recommending or they're proposing the development. The important thing to point out too is there's full protection adjacent to that power line.
Agreed.
Yeah, so that's an important piece to us.
Any other questions?
So
Harvey?
going back to the landfill,
Sure.
how are you stabilizing, are you using native plants for stabilizing the sand, or how are you going to do that?
Well, I'm not doing
Or how are they
it.
going
We're
to
not doing it. They're doing it. Yes. So they're going to use a combination initially of terracing native plants and a cover crop of oats early on to get it established. Yep. Yeah, they learned a lot from the test plots on what to do and what not to do. So the most important thing is getting the haul road done and the sand done early enough in the season that they can plant it and have it green up and stabilize the sand. The concern with the permit was if the permit was going to come later in the season, they still wouldn't be able to do anything this year other than construct the haul road. The key is really to get out there and get it stabilized as early as possible, get it green. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have Lisa Anthony with the financial report. Good morning.
Our statement of financial activities, this represents through January 31st, which is 10 months of our fiscal year. On the revenue side, dues and contributions are on budget through January. Government grant income is at 91% of budget. This is directly related to expenses. This will be a little bit under at year end due to 2 vacancies in personnel. Mitigation fees are slightly over budget. They should be close to budget at the end of the year. Lease revenue is on budget. And other revenue is $4,800 higher than budget. This is due to an increase in both merchandise sales and clothing on our gift shop. Total revenue came in at 93% of budget through January. Moving on to expenses, personnel and fringe are under budget, again due to 2 vacancies throughout the year, and this will end up under budget for the year. Travel and training is at 46% of budget. This will end up under budget for the year as well. We had some conferences that were in West Virginia, pretty far to travel, and a CEC position that was vacant throughout the year. Contractual is under budget. This is mainly due to fixed assets that we coded to fixed assets that did not get coded to contractual, or bigger purchases, and a savings in legal fees and appraisals. Communication is under budget. It's 91%. This should be close to budget at the end of the year. This is due to timely printing projects and postage. Occupancy is 77% of budget. This is based on DC Discovery Center, utilities, National Grid, waste management, etc. It's a little bit under. It should be very close at the end of the year. Supplies and equipment are under budget. This is across all departments. This may end up a little bit under budget for the year. We are again buying things like a smart board, which are coded to fixed assets, which were in supplies and equipment. So other expenses under budget, $21,000. This is due to a savings in insurance and some marketing, promotion, and social media. This will end up a little bit under budget as well. Total expenses came in at 85%, revenue at 93%, giving us a higher net income of $246,000. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on to our statement of net assets. Cash decreased. This is just due to an increasing spending in the last quarter of the year, which is typical. We usually see this every year. Conservation and land reserves remain the same. Grants receivable increased $364,000. This was due to money owed for both DEC and our federal grant, and they both have been paid. Accounts receivable increased due to the increase in mitigation funds. This has been paid as well. Inventory increased slightly, and this is due to purchases in the gift shop. Prepaid expenses decreased due to the timing of year-end expenditures that fall into next year. Investments increased $119,000 due to a positive performance in all three funds through January. Capital assets increased $35,000 due to a conceptual design, grounds design project. And deferred outflows from retirement. This is the booking that you will see every January financials in our March meeting. This is the deferred outflows, the reporting requirements for GASB 68 through our New York State Retirement Program, and this is an actuarial calculation. So we have a total increase of $471,000 in net assets, and this is due to the increase in grants receivables and deferred outflows from retirement. Moving on to liabilities, accounts payable and accrued expenses decreased slightly. This is due to a repayment of bonds. Deferred revenue decreased, and this is due to a DEC advance being utilized. And again, the New York State pension liability, this is the actuarial calculation as and above for the deferred outflows that we run every year, and that increased $156,000. So our total liability increased $106,000 over last year, and this is basically due to the pension liability that we accrue. So on the net asset side, capital assets increased $35,000 for conceptual design work. Reserved assets remain the same. Unreserved assets increased $330,000, giving us a total increase of $365,000 due to a positive NOI and a positive investment performance. On the investment side, the reserve fund increased 2.85%. Discovery Center endowment 1.04, and the endowment 1.52, giving us a total gain on investments of $119,000. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to discuss what's called the other post-employment benefits, or OPEB for short. We touched on this briefly during executive session last board meeting. I want to open it up for discussion. This is a benefit that is specific to providing health insurance for retired employees with the Pine Bush Commission. The audit committee took a hard look at the financial responsibilities associated with providing this benefit. It was determined within our committee that continuing on the way that we are is not something that we feel is sustainable for the commission. So during our discussion within the committee, we discussed four things. One is to leave the benefit as is. We also looked at eliminating the benefit for new hires, and then we also looked at reducing the commission's contribution towards that benefit for new hires. We came away with the recommendation that maintaining the status quo is not economically feasible. So the committee recommends one of two options, which is either eliminating this benefit for all new hires, or to reduce the benefit from the current 90/75 split. That's 90 for individuals, 75 for family coverage, versus reducing it to 50/35. If you go to, I think it's page 13 on your packets, there's estimates on how much this costs the commission. There was estimates made of roughly $250,000 per employee for the life of their retirement. Again, this is just for healthcare. This has nothing to do with pensions. And there was a lot of assumptions being made trying to calculate those numbers. Actuary tables were used. I think it's actually conservatively low number because there was an assumption made that the cost of health care isn't going to skyrocket, and if recent past tells us anything, that's probably unlikely. So those numbers could be higher than what is calculated. So currently at $250 per person, there's already a commitment in place for the commission to provide what's estimated as almost $4.5 million for health insurance benefits for current employees. So what I'd like to discuss with the board is, any thoughts on how we should proceed with new employees, with taking the two options that's recommended by the audit committee, and then after our discussion, having a vote so that we can implement whatever the new policy is. Is there any thoughts or any comments anybody wants to start off with?
Keith, I'll jump in and offer a couple thoughts because I'm a member of the audit committee. We have an obligation, a commitment to our existing employees, and we also have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize funding to maintain the Albany Pine Bush and do that in a sustainable way. And in talking with Chris, it would seem that if we eliminate this benefit, it does not put the Pine Bush in a non-competitive position relative to new hires. In other words, we won't, this will still be an employer of choice for folks that have the skill sets that we like to hire.
Yeah.
So it won't hurt us
No.
by eliminating this. And so my feeling was that given the obligation, the best way to protect the obligation to existing employees and to maintain our funding in a sustainable way is to eliminate this benefit for future employees. And that's just what I would offer up to the board.
Chris, I'm just curious about the audit committee. There are two options considered. I know that, John, you're talking about the first one.
Yep.
Is there anybody who was advocating for the second?
There is a desire amongst everyone at the table.
Well, by the way, I'm not looking for you necessarily to espouse support for the second option.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
wondering
no.
if there's anybody here in the room who would like to maybe, if that's okay. I mean, is that something that, does it have to be on the board to hear from somebody else?
I don't have a problem hearing anybody's opinions on this issue. I will say that the audit committee wasn't unanimous in its position as far as having one option moving forward, if that answers your question there.
Well, no, I heard John's argument about eliminating. I just wondered if anybody would like to present the alternative,
Oh,
which is reducing the 50/35. Or if somebody here can, if it's...
I think I can summarize it if you want.
Sure.
I'm not a member of the committee. I'm an employee, obviously. And this obviously impacts me. I mean, there's a concern that, there's a number of public authorities and other agencies, and like, for example, all state agencies provide this benefit. But they're obviously different than we are for our funding stream. But there's a financial responsibility here, but some people also, and the committee worked through this pretty hard. There's a moral responsibility to trying to continue this benefit for people as new hires, and that's basically where we came up with, okay, if we were to maintain it, understanding that this is a big financial liability for the commission, how much can we reduce it? What is the absolute lowest we can go to still provide this benefit? And that was the 50/35 for new hires. And that would equate to, Keith mentioned the $250,000 per person, that obligation. That's a cash obligation. That's not just a liability. Well, it will be cash. So if you dropped it to 50/35, is everybody familiar with that? What that would be? So the commission pays 50%. It's employee family. All right. So it would drop to $183,000 per person. So it's still a very large liability. One of the things that, whatever the board decides here, the important thing is that the board is, I would recommend that the board direct myself, Lisa, and the audit committee to then, wherever we land, eliminating or not, we have a current fiscal, we have a liability here for the staff and an obligation. Where is that funding going to come from? And let's identify how we're going to, develop an account, fund that annually, and project that out. So that's kind of like the next steps. So I figured I'd add that as well. Does that help, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I don't know, Chris, if you want to bring up, you looked at similar agencies that have similar size, similar.
Sure.
And compare, what do they provide their employees?
Yeah.
Discuss that as well.
So, I looked around at, there's nobody that really compares to the Pine Bush Commission equitably. Now that we're a state authority, but we have this unique funding source, and that unique funding source is an appropriation from the legislature for operations on the ground work in this preserve, managing this preserve, and staffing, right? The closest you get would be the Long Island Pine Barrens Commission, Central Pine Barrens Commission. They receive an appropriation, but they are housed within the Suffolk County Water Authority, so they have a little different structure. They pay for this liability, but they figured out that liability long ago. But it's something that comes up annually. I had a conversation with their executive director. Is this something that they can continue to do long term? At this point, yes. The Natural Heritage Trust, where we had a relationship with them a few years ago, if you remember, when we were part of the Nature Conservancy, and then we had a relationship with the Natural Heritage Trust as employees under a contract. The Natural Heritage Trust is a small public authority, staff of about 35 to 40, unique funding source in a way like we are. They took a hard look at this a couple of years ago with their board, and they decided to no longer provide OPEB. And then from that point to another point, they created an HRA, a health reimbursement account, which is like an FSA, but for in retirement your healthcare expenses up to a certain level, and it's a floating scale with how many years you have within. They eliminated that. They have nothing. They don't do anything going forward now because of the liability and the expense associated with it. I mean, everybody understands that the issue with this is all about healthcare costs, right? And every municipality, every agency is struggling with healthcare costs. Private businesses, John, this is a fantastic benefit, just like pensions are, and we're very fortunate to have that. But as time goes on, people are recognizing that the costs of healthcare are really starting to make people think hard about it. That's kind of my, after talking to a lot of people and trying to see where they come from and understand this is a far cry from my background and training in plant ecology.
Remind me where the Natural Heritage Trust is.
Where they get their funding from?
Yeah.
So their funding comes primarily from their contracts, because they hire a lot of staff to work on different projects. So they would have staff under contract that would work for parks or DEC or maybe like EFC, Environmental Facilities Corp, I think. And that contract money is how they generate their income, and they have large trusts that they live off of too, from interest-bearing trusts. So they don't, I use an example of like a big authority, thruway authority charges tolls. Bridge authorities charge tolls to go over bridges. You can raise those costs or those prices to deal with healthcare costs going up. We can't really do that. We don't have a dedicated, we don't have a fee-based structure. The only fees we've ever had are for programs, and that's not going to drive this fiscal situation.
Were we considering any other kind of structures? I mean, I assume that this is buying into your existing healthcare plan that employees are accessing. Was there any consideration of thinking of an alternate model where we assume people are getting on Medicare, and that you would have something that would help them pay for supplemental? I mean, that's kind of how they do it with my work.
Yeah.
Is that there's no real benefit, but everybody it's a very minimal amount, but that they're expecting Medicare to take it, and then a little bit of money that you can use to kind of pay into that, as opposed to paying into a full-blown healthcare system.
That's,
This does assume,
it assumes
night
medic,
shift is secondary to Medicare.
Oh, it is, okay, so that this
65.
cost is assuming that's already
Yes,
happening.
It's already happening.
at 60, not 62, 65?
65.
Right.
So,
So night
but,
shift will be secondary to Medicare at 65 in this actuarial.
Okay, so in terms
But
of-
primary for the first 3 years.
And so the 50/30 is already accounted for that.
Already.
But your model is just, it's maybe the...
Closer to the
like-
HRA.
Right, just, here's some money, we're going to support whatever you can find for your healthcare.
Yeah, and that's so that's what NHT did for a while. So they created this HRA with a third party, and so NHT didn't manage it, staff didn't manage it, they dealt, and they paid this third party provider, and then they recognized that even that paying that third party provider and those benefits was prohibitive for them. And they did that for a period of, I think, 3 years.
so this is maybe an off question, but what would be the appetite of the legislature to consider this issue? In terms of, when you're getting most of your money from legislature.
Yep.
Would this conversation enhance our likelihood to continue securing that obligation going forward? Out of obligation to successful management of the program, which I think is unparalleled, right? This is a fantastically run place, everything, great reputation. So it's kind of like cost of doing business.
I'm going to look at Jessica Otney Mahar, because she's the policy director for the Nature Conservancy and sits on this board, and the person that I talk to about legislative issues. I'm going to ask your opinion before I provide my.
And I'm sorry I was late. I had to teach at my child's school this morning, so I'm sorry.
Well, that's fine.
I think that this is a tricky issue. So legislators view the Environmental Protection Fund largely as a capital fund. And this year the governor is attempting to sweep it all for state agency staffing. So the dynamic is very sour about the concept of paying for staff members at agencies of any kind from the EPF, which is the source of funding for the Pine Bush Commission.
Yes.
I think that dynamic and the fact that there are a lot of questions from the legislature about the spend rate on the EPF generally, not this program, but others, could lead to a lot of questioning. And I'm not sure that there would be an appetite for going to them and asking for more money to pay for, retirement benefits for staff.
I guess where I would go with that is I would think that it wouldn't be necessarily favorable based on this being a benefit that is looked on as a very excellent benefit that many organizations don't have the luxury of having. And every year it comes up, when collective bargaining starts again, which will be happening soon for like CSEA and PEF, this comes up every year. And at some point, based on conversations within your human resource department, your agency, at some point it'll probably bend where this type of benefit is going to, it'll be on that sliding scale. So if you got 10 years in, you're going to get maybe 10 years in retirement. You got 20 years in, you might get 20 years in retirement, and it probably won't be 90-10. At some point, that's what's going to happen with that collective bargaining. So I would assume that that's how the legislature might look at that. I don't know. I have not broached that subject.
When they look at those positions, they're looking at some FTE calculation of money, right? Like for state employees, I'm assuming. Like
Do you mean at the agencies?
Yeah. So there would, and this benefit would be in that FTE calculation.
Well, I think there's apples and oranges going on here. So I think it's just that This program's actually pretty unique in the funding source it sits in, and so going to them and saying, oh, we need an increase in a capital fund for expenditures to cover staff retirement benefits, I just don't know that there's an appetite for that.
I guess, go ahead.
And I think it's also, when we say staff, the whole discussion is about future employees.
That's correct.
We're not having a discussion about anyone that we employ now.
That's correct.
So these are future employees.
I guess my understanding is
That's right.
the way it works in agencies would be, so agencies overall absorb this big cost.
Right.
So the EPF would be paying salaries, and I don't know if they're paying benefits or not, but these offloads, so this big nut for healthcare and retirement, the state has this, the way they deal with NISHIP with their health insurance, it's this massive pot of funding that deals with it. That's my understanding.
I'm just, again, curious. I mean, again, it's a model agency. Would be politically correct to say it's progressive, socially, a standout. I'm just wondering if there might be, I'm not looking to kick the can down the road, but so much of these numbers are dependent upon healthcare costs, performance in the stock market, state budgets. I mean, all these figures are out there, is whether or not we might proceed with the 50-35 model and just agree to look at it every year to determine whether or not, we need to eliminate it. I'm just wondering if it might be like a middle part. I'm not disagreeing with your point, John. I'm just trying to think of, maybe we should be a standout. Maybe we should be what, other employers should be looking to model in some way.
I think we have to balance the ability of us to be a standout and the Pine Bush Commission's ability to carry out its mission and maintain, fiscal sustainability with providing those progressive benefits. And, maybe there are other opportunities or, investment opportunities or other things that we can be giving new employees that isn't this, that could put us on a path to more fiscal stability. But this concerned me when I saw the numbers. I was very concerned about this. And as someone who works for an organization with an incredibly generous benefits package, I get none of these benefits. So I am also fairly comfortable saying, well, this would, if you made a change for new hires, it would bring it in line with some of the larger environmental management organizations that are doing work in the state that are also offering generous benefit packages that are as progressive as the industry allows us to be, but not going to the point of, state retirement.
The only thing I would point out, I'm not advocating for anything. We still have to remember, we have no funding set aside currently for this $4.5 million liability, which that's a long time down the road. That's a liability. That's not a cash number yet, but it will be. And we have to, as an organization, we have a reserve account. We have an endowment. We used to take 5% out of that endowment and use it for operations. We haven't done that in a number of years. But there's opportunities there to fund the current liability, but that still hasn't been figured out.
Right.
So that's for the person who's responsible to the board, along with Lisa and I working together, we have to be able to provide something to show you how we're going to make this work for you.
I'd like to add too, with regards to looking at this every year at a reduced rate. What I don't want us to find ourselves is in a position where we can't follow through on our commitments to existing employees. We've seen lots of entities or agencies having to change what they've committed to current employees, where towns have reduced their benefit packages that were basically provided to the employees at the time of hiring, and really essentially changing the rules on the employees. I'm very concerned of putting ourselves in that position as well. So, also we're going to lose eventually the mitigation monies from the landfill, right? That's another funding stream that will eventually dry up. So
How much does that represent of our income? roughly?
It's budgeted at 200,000 this year. We dropped it to 150 for fiscal year starting April 1st.
But you know, this is a lot to digest. I know, I mean, the audit committee meeting really did discuss this at length. We looked at a lot of different things. You know, this is really the best that we could come up with, were these two options. So, does anybody else want to weigh in on it before we have a vote on how we should proceed?
Not that I mind voting, but I just was curious, 'cause I thought it was a discussion, I didn't know it was an action item.
It is a discussion topic.
We can
I'm not looking
delay
at
the
the punt, I just was curious.
Understood. We can delay the vote if necessary, but I mean, I'm not sure when's the next.
June.
March?
You're gonna be,
June.
June's the next meeting. You have positions you're gonna be filling,
No,
nothing between now and June.
no, there's no full-time positions on the horizon.
So we can wait if board members want to, you know, take this back and think about it a little bit, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, the only hires are seasonals, and the seasonals aren't eligible.
I think we would like to have a decision certainly made by the next board meeting, so if we decide not to vote today, if we can plan on having a vote the next meeting, I think we should at least have it by then.
One thing I would offer about votes is this organization has never had a vote that is a 6-5, right? We don't do that. I remember back in this very room, maybe 15 years ago,
Oh, yeah,
right?
landfill.
It looked like we were going to have that kind of a vote. And we got our heads together and came up with a better answer. But I also don't think that between now and the next meeting, there's going to be any new information. And it's always a sobering topic. And I would just prefer to get this behind us. This will be the third meeting that we discuss this. And it is what it is.
I just wanted to ask, I know you're concerned about where is the $4.5 million coming from for the existing liability. Should we have that discussion as a board related to the vote on what we do going forward? Because if there's some magic mechanism that we can come up with for that $4.5 million, could solve our problem. Do you have ideas? Do you have proposals?
I would prefer to have the audit committee, I would prefer to have the board direct staff to work with the audit committee to come up with some ideas and present them at the June meeting, how to fund the current $4.5 million. I mean, pulling a pie out of the sky, look at that reserve account, take a portion of that reserve account, whatever that number is, and I don't know what it is, and you have to calculate it out, and then take probably, not out of your appropriation annually, because an appropriation I'd like to see continue to do what it does. I mean, we're spending all that appropriation for managing this place, right? Take a portion out of that reserve account and then look at the endowment. We used to take 5% of the 3-year average, right? Take a portion of that. Take 1, 2, 2.5, 3%. I don't know what it is, up to 5. The problem is you're going to dip into principal at some point like we used to, and fund it every year. And you can project it out. And what does that number look like? Like Lisa and I can work with our auditor too, and the finance committee and our audit committee, and see what that $4.5 million liability, how we address that. That's step one, I think.
It would be helpful for me anyway to see that. I'm not a numbers person, if there was room in there to build it. I don't know what that does. I don't know what that accomplishes and how long.
Well,
when is that
Or it
liability
may
come
show-
due?
Or it may show that there's
Yeah.
a real it's even hard to do.
Right, either one of, yeah.
How hard it is to do.
And my employee hat is completely off. We have a reserve account, and we just got our legislation changed for us to be able to acquire land. And that reserve account is the only opportunity that we have to be able to acquire land in the situations that we changed our legislation to do that for. The point is because the state is so limited in their ability to move quickly because of the backlog, we changed the legislation so we, the commission, can hold title. We could borrow from that reserve account, protect land. We've got another 2,100 acres to go. Protect that land, sit on that, and then get reimbursed from the state and do it again. So it's a small revolving fund. But I guess as the executive director, I'd hate to see us deplete that. I'd like to see us keep all that in mind, not deplete it. That's the wrong way to say it. I'd
Right,
like to
because
keep that all in mind.
this obligation is not due, right?
No, but it's going to show up on your balance sheet, and it's going to take that 12 million, 13 million, 12 million. The $12 million balance, and it's going to take $4.5 million away already. And
Right, it's going to limit our ability to activate reserves for other purposes, so.
Yeah. And at some point, I would assume even if there's no matter what happens, no continuing, modifying, or no change, that balance sheet is going to go into the red because the liability is going to continue to go up. The actuarial calculations, Lisa, 4.6 or something like that. Annually it goes up. So 3.8 this year, 4.5 next year, 5.1 next year.
And we're using a very conservative model for healthcare costs.
Yeah.
4.6 up to 4.7 in year 7 through 20. So it is a very conservative number. Those healthcare costs can skyrocket. They've been as high as 15%.
As an employer, I haven't had a number that low in the last 10 years.
Right. So we're using a very conservative number to get to that 4.4 million that I have to book. We will book a prior year entry up to 0.9 million, and you will see on audited financials an expense of $840,000 this year. I am booking that currently.
In fact, to keep my numbers below double, I wind up having to cut benefits or ask for more employee contribution on existing employees.
Correct.
That's the only way I can do it.
Elaine, did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
Thank you.
How did you arrive at the 50-35?
50-35?
Yeah.
To provide this benefit, you have to go through NISHIP, New York State Health Insurance Program plan, the insurance provider. That's the low, to be able to provide these benefits in retirement to do this, that's the lowest you can do it. You can go anywhere basically between, there's different levels.
Okay.
You go from 90-75 down to 50-35. 50-35 is the lowest that they will do that.
And that funding will depend on market performance if we use those three funds. So it's variable. So
Right, that's a good point. Like those investments are just those, they're investments.
They're investments.
That reserve account is mostly in fixed, so it's
Right.
fairly stable. It's very conservative based on our investment policy statement. Richard?
I wonder if the fact that the Pine Bush is fairly young, so you haven't had to deal yet with the retirement part
Right,
of the whole program.
right.
So you really have to look at it in a more fearful mode.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the staff, a lot of them got hired at the same time. This is all going to come home to roost at the same time. So.
And when is that?
Chris?
Keep doing those exercises, Chris.
Never.
If you'll keep me, I have an awful long time to go. You've got more than a decade.
That
A
goes so
lot could
fast.
happen in a decade.
Oh, yeah.
And it goes fast, too.
Well, if you think, if
My feeling is similar to yours. I anticipate that this calculation, that if we ask you to do it, it's going to be very sobering. That said, actually seeing, the degree of that will really help kind of...
Be convincing.
Will help inform my decision about this. And I do understand you've been much more kind of physically involved in the process and wanting to get, kind of getting onto the next set of the issues. But from my perspective, not having been involved in that, it feels like it came up pretty quickly, and it's a big decision for us. And I would, it seems to me to be a good path to try to look at what some of the numbers might be to pay for the existing liabilities, and then make a decision in that. Again, it seems like the cards are on the table, but it'd be nice to see what the whole hand is.
Before you vote.
Okay, well, I mean, if there's people who feel more comfortable doing that way, I don't see any harm, honestly, because like Chris says, there's no plans to hire permanent employees. So there's no real impact of delaying this decision for another quarter. I want the board to be very comfortable with the decision that they're making. So maybe we can put together what it would entail, or how we would pay for our current commitments. I think you're right, Steve. I think it's going to be very sobering. But with that, at least everybody will have all the cards on the table and can make a vote with their eyes wide open.
So to help me understand, so we have this one document that we put together, which is basically making a lot of assumptions to look at what the cash expenditure would be per year, and when the first person would be eligible for retirement, making that assumption in 2024, retirement age is 62, an annual rate increase of 5%, family coverage with 100% participation, and it's based on our current annual health insurance cost, which is $19,200. So we've got those numbers, again, with a lot of, we're making a lot of assumptions, but they're probably moderately conservative.
Those weren't
These aren't in your packet,
No,
because
no,
I didn't want this to be leading to a discussion. I didn't want to lead a discussion one way or the other.
Yeah.
This, the audit committee looked at, with something like this combined with coming up with a way to fund the current liability, put those two materials together for the discussion and a vote, potentially a vote in June. Would that be, is that what I'm hearing, what would be best?
Chris, could we schedule a workshop? Is that appropriate for a board like this to get together to, or at least to offer a workshop? You could take the audit committee that's scheduled the Friday before the June meeting and use that as an opportunity. Just open that up.
Because it's already scheduled, it's June, it's always the same time as these meetings, it's 9:30, June 14th. And we could use that for any board members, any and all board members who wish to participate, and we could go through this stuff. We could schedule it, we scheduled the audit committee 9:30 to 11, we could do that.
That would probably be helpful for people to take enough time and really digest the material together and ask questions.
When Key Bank was going to come and talk to us at that meeting, I wonder if we could get them to put some stuff together for us. I don't know if I want to do that.
They won't do actuarial calculations, I think.
No.
If we enlist Wojcicki,
More appropriate. The audit, our accounting firm.
would be more appropriate. Frank, he has a lot of experience with this, with school districts and
Right, that's right.
and, they are in the red. So he has a lot of experience doing this. So I can reach out
To Frank?
to Frank and see what the best way to go about this would be. Again, we're dealing with a lot of variables if we choose to use our endowment. Is it endowment? What is that going to look like? We really don't know where the market's going, So we have to kind of look at that with a lot of variables that we are not going to be able to predict.
Would that be, is that along the lines you're thinking of, John?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, the second item of discussion was with regards to eligibility, and That part only, that becomes moot if the final decision is that we eliminate the benefit altogether. If we decide to go with the reduced benefits, this change in eligibility is just requiring 10 years of service credit with the Pine Bush. In the past, you just had to have 10 years of credit with essentially an entity that participates in the New York State retirement program. So it's a minor change, and again, the change would only come into play if we decide to have a reduced benefit. So that's what that piece is. We don't need to really go too much into that one right now because it might turn out to be moot at the end anyway.
Just a quick question, did that eligibility, is that then factored into the cost per person?
Well, it's tough to say because essentially all it does is, these are for new hires, and we don't know how many new hires are going to be hired with, years of service with another agency, for instance, right? So.
Well, and this one was, the 10 years was the idea that someone who had worked for New York State for 30 years could retire, come to work for the Pine Bush for a year, and then the Pine Bush is eligible,
Or before they retire.
but we don't have to pay for that,
The pension would, it'd be an
The
example,
pension-
say, if somebody with 25 years of state service decides to get a job with the Pine
Yeah.
Bush and then retires after a year.
Right.
And then the Pine Bush under the current situation, would have to pay for their health insurance.
Health insurance.
This is only,
Health
again, this is
insurance.
only related
Yeah,
to
so
health insurance.
that's why we put it there.
Yeah.
Have to be reminded every time.
So that's very hard to predict, Peter, because, it depends on.
No, my question was
So-
really more, is change in eligibility, was that considered with that number? But it sounds like.
No.
No,
No.
it wouldn't, yeah.
Yet in that 183, that on 5035, that's based on the numbers that we have just for current staff, because we did the actuarial calculations just for the 17 that we have now, based on gender, age, all those things that actuarials, kind of put into the sausage maker and come out with the numbers.
Any other questions about the eligibility piece? Okay,
Okay?
let's move on to the action items.
What are we doing on time?
You're on time.
On time, we're early.
We're ahead of schedule.
Let's keep that going. Okay, so you want me to introduce this?
Yes.
Okay. So the first action item A, is a formal requirement that we have. So there's 3 properties that DEC just recently dedicated to the preserve. A little over 48 acres. Those 3 parcels, there's a map in here, there's the actual commissioner's order, which has to be part of the official board packet that we have, but if you look through, you can see where those properties are, those red properties. Those are properties that the Nature Conservancy acquired a long time ago, one of which was acquired in 2002. So the state of New York acquired those from the Nature Conservancy. Thank you to the Nature Conservancy for hanging on to those for so long.
And the DEC's lightning speed of getting those.
Thus the reason for the change in the legislation. Those 3 properties are now dedicated to the preserve, so as a board, the commission has to accept those to be part of the preserve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, supposing we hadn't accepted this, what would have happened then?
Then DEC would, we wouldn't post them, we wouldn't manage them. DEC would be
Stuck?
stuck.
With little pieces.
I don't know, that's an interesting question because the law says, each dedication has to be reviewed and approved by the commission. So if the commission says, no, we're not taking that. The only reason you would say no, we're not taking it because it has toxic waste on it.
Trying to figure out why we would say no
I
and
know.
what would happen.
I know. But the state wouldn't take property in that situation anyway.
Right, and obviously, it's property that the commission's already shown interest in acquiring, or at least having
It's the
dedicated in
management
the first place.
obligation. I mean, that's what
That's a
we're
good
accepting.
question.
Oh, I understand what we're
Yeah.
accepting, I'm just trying to figure out
No,
what would happen to that land if we didn't accept
Well,
it.
I think
And like I say,
DEC
it's
would
not-
get mad and they would not do these projects with us anymore.
That's quite possible.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Then we have these parcels that
But
we
you
would
still have to
we
do
would be
something with the land.
responsible.
I mean, are you gonna
Well,
sell it, are you gonna do, I mean,
That is an interesting question, but the point really is so the Nature Conservancy first would never have acquired them.
Right.
Because if they're not a high priority it all ties back to the management plan, right? So if somebody wants to donate or dedicate their, I don't know what. All right, how about action item B? This is we have purchasing and procurement guidelines. They're a requirement of all public authorities, part of the public authorities law. The law requires that we review and update those every year. There's no changes to them. We updated them last year with some minor language changes, but there's no change this year. So they just have to be readopted on an annual basis.
so you're saying there's no changes at all in this?
None.
That's so moved, easy.
Second.
It is a formality, but the point is that we're paying attention to our.
Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Well,
Second.
someone seconded it.
Okay, all in
Yeah.
favor?
Perfect.
Aye.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Tyler Briggs, presenting on fire management. Tyler.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning, Tyler.
Tyler Briggs was our fire management specialist and fire management and GIS specialist. Tyler's new title is fire manager.
Fire manager. His title got shorter.
He got shorter,
Easier to say.
Yeah,
easier to say.
I like that.
So what I'm going to do is I have a short presentation for you all. I'm just going to recap the 2018 burn season and then preview what we have planned for 2019. So 2018 burn season. I attended the NOAA spring fire weather meeting just last month, and there was just some interesting points to mention to you guys. Last year, we had 3 nor'easters in the month of March, and it was below average temperatures for March, and that segued into the 7th coldest April on record in the Albany area. And then it was just like flipping a switch. Once we got into May, it got real hot and dry, and it was the 8th warmest May in Albany. So here was our potential burn list for 2018, highlighted in red, and that was 661 acres. And we successfully burned 243 acres. Everything's highlighted in black there. It was a really good year for fire at the Albany Pine Bush, specifically in the spring. And it was the 3rd time we broke 200 acres. We did that on 13 burn days, which was the same as 2017. We just did some larger units. That's why we were able to hit over 200. So I just broke it down by month here, just so you guys could see a visual. Burned 32 acres in April. May, we did almost all of our burning in. June, some smaller units, and then after July, it got really wet here. We had rain storms like every week, and we had a real lousy, I guess, summer and fall for prescribed burning here in the Pine Bush. And I separated it also by days, so you can see May again was 5 burn days. April, really wasn't that good, just with the cold temperatures. That wasn't all the burning the fire crew did here. We assisted the the DEC with their first burn ever at the Louise E. Kerr Wildlife Management Area, which is in southern Albany County. I believe it was 15 acres. We helped them with the burn down there, and it was the first time I led a burn on site. We also assisted, I guess there were 6 total assists last year. We assisted the Fish and Wildlife Service with burns at Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge, which is over in Batavia, and Shawgunk, which is down by New Paltz. We also traveled to Maine and assisted the Nature Conservancy with some pine barrens burning at their Wells Barrens Preserve, and we were up there in September. In July, we also assisted with the Flat Rock Fire, and that was a wildfire that started in mid-July in the Flat Rock Preserve, Flat Rock State Forest, which is north of Plattsburgh. I don't know if anybody's been up there, but it looks kind of similar to the Albany pine bush, just they have a jack pine forest there, and it's not sandy soils, it's a rock shelf that drains fast. I took the fire crew and then some of our volunteers, pictured in that photograph in the top left, and we led 2 burnouts on the Flat Rock fire. So we've gotten the opportunity to assist the state a bunch of times over the years, and because we have expertise in prescribed fire, a lot of times they put us in the firing role. So I'm a firing boss on the wildfires, and so they brought us in to lead some of their burnout operations there. So we were up there for 2 days, and I believe it was like a 20-acre burn-off was the first one, and then a 10-acre. Yeah, oh, and absolutely ask questions. Yeah.
So I'm assuming, I think I know what a burn-off is, but could you just
Yeah, sure. So in wildland fire, there's 2 ways to put a fire out. You can either go direct, it's called, and extinguish the fire where it is, or you can go indirect and anticipate the direction the fire is moving, and use an existing road or put in a dozer line in the way that the fire is moving. And a burnout is when you prep a line and you light a fire there. So when the main fire hits your control line, it runs into an already burnt out area.
That's what I thought, but maybe it was
no, that's what
something
it
else.
is. This one was in the middle of the forest in 2015. We went down to the Rosa Gap fire, which was a 3,000-acre fire, also in the Shawgunk Ridge, in the Rosa Gap State Forest, and there the Pine Bush crew let it burn out behind a hamlet of about 12 houses that were being evacuated by state police. So state police closed the road down. The fire had basically jumped their dozer line and was moving across the ridge in the direction of this hamlet. It's a hamlet of Craigsmore in, I think, Ulster County. And the fire trucks, they had the departments knocking on the doors and evacuating the houses, and we put what's called a wet line in place. So in absence of a bulldozer line, you can wet down the vegetation behind the home and then light a fire along the wet line, basically. And then we pulled the wet line from house to house, lighting a fire basically at the edge of their backyard. And that worked in that situation because when the fire came down there, we had a buffer of black in between the main fire and the houses. So we were doing that same method there. It was just off a bulldozer line in the middle of this forest. So this is what we have in store for this year. Those are our 2019 burn units. And I just wanted to throw this up to show you that we buffered all of those burn units by 1 mile and grabbed every address within a mile and mailed them a postcard. So this was last year's postcard, but I brought some so you guys can see. I have enough for everybody, but if you pass them down.
They're in the Discovery Center as well.
So I send those out in the spring.
You ever get any responses?
Oh yeah. So yeah, I know that they're getting them now. So my voicemail just fills up with people that call and they ask to be put on a burn notification list. So the day before the burn, myself and my staff will call anybody who asks to be on the list, and they can either be notified for any burn that's happening across the preserve or one's just local to where they are. And it takes if I'm doing them by myself, it's like a 3-hour job calling everybody, and if I have my 2 seasonals helping, it takes an hour for the 3 of us to get through the phone calls. That's the system we've been using now. It works pretty good, just because you can answer any concerns that people have, but most of the time we're actually leaving voicemails because everybody's ignoring the phone call. Wendy helps, I don't know if she's here, by putting out a message on Facebook. We have an email list too. Some people want to be notified by email. I was in Long Island earlier this week talking to Brian Gallagher, their burn boss with the Forest Rangers. They do a reverse 911 for their notifications, and it's something we might look into doing here if Albany County can provide that service. But that's our method now. So we blast out postcards to everybody. I also send letters to a bunch of businesses and officials asking them if they want to be on this notification list. So some of you guys will probably be getting a letter from me in the mail soon. We might be burning as early as next week, so the notifications are out. We got a permit from the county to work on the right-of-way, the shoulder of their roads. We put in for one of the throughway, but they always take forever to get back to us for whatever reason. But anyway, that's what we have planned for this year. This was just a really cool picture of a corner that was located in the Andromeda unit, which is on Kings Road, Barron's. And I have some videos and some pictures of fire just to show you guys, and then I can also answer any questions you guys might have about the burns, why we burn, where we burn.
So how many acres are the target for 2019?
Well, we're trying to burn at least 200, and I'm sorry, it's around I think 500 that we have planned for potentially burning this year, but we never get to all of it because we have limited burn days. We also have them spread out across the preserve, so the commission staff plans these out in conservation meetings, and we look at when was the time we last burned this unit. Has it ever been burned before? For the maintenance ones, we want to burn them every 3 to 5 years. For areas where we're storing, we just try and get in there as frequently as we can. So we also disperse them around into different regions. And we do that because you have to have really specific wind directions to have these burns. So we're looking for sunny, dry days with a consistent wind direction to push the smoke away from sensitive areas. We also have them spread out, so if we have a fire, say in one area, and we had a lot of lingering drift smoke that potentially created some negative feedback from the public, we can move away from that area and try and avoid that neighborhood for the rest of the year. We pick the best days we can, but there's always going to be some drift smoke, and sometimes people are just looking for an ear to chew on, about other things that they don't like the thinning. that we've been doing, and they're just using the fires just to get somebody on the phone. So like when we burned a field out on Curry Road, or no, sorry, Kings Road over by Morris, and that was in October. It was the last burn of the year. It burned all right, but the biggest complaint we got from that was some guy at the underwriters board, which is just beyond on Curry Road extension. He was pissed about he didn't even notice the fire. He just saw the precaution smoke ahead sign on the road, and he was upset about the thinning that happened all around. If you ever drive out there, you'll see that's where we just did the thinning that we got commended by those folks on. But he was upset about that, and then was like, now you're burning it too? And I was telling him, like, we're not burning there. That's just to alert motorists that of the potential hazard of smoke ahead. But I'll follow up with anybody who calls me afterwards. Most of the time, they're pretty cool once you just talk to them for a little bit and let them know, what happened or why you're doing that. If you just go to Google Maps, this is really cool because the last time they updated their imagery was in 2016, and they caught one of our smoke plumes from a burn in Cardinal Gardens West. And this year, you can see the burn imprint. This was that Andromeda unit that had the Carners in, and you can see the black and the control lines that we put around the burn. You can also see that the north-facing slope of the dune doesn't burn as hot always, and it's just because it's shaded aspect more often than not. I don't know if you can see. The Fido burn right beside the center shows up really well. Here we are here. We burned this chunk in June. I got a couple pictures of this one to show you guys. That burned very well. And then, oops. Here's 155 where it crosses the thruway. This big unit here is called Friendly. We tried to burn that twice, also in the month of June. It's kind of difficult because it's got this long, narrow section right by the highway. And it's a spot where you have to be careful because this is right after the 24 toll on the thruway. And it's right where 87, comes into pre-90. And people are kind of jockeying for position right after you pass the landfill as the two highways merge. And you can see here, we had to shut this burn down twice because we weren't getting enough wind to blow the smoke away from the highway. So I have to watch that. And I think we're impacting or causing a safety concern. The burn's got to be shut down. So on this day, we had, Keith, I think you actually were out here for when we shut it down. We started the burn. There was supposed to be a southwest wind, and we just, it was almost like no wind at all once the burn got going, so we had to shut it down because smoke was wafting into the westbound lane.
I recall people pulled over to watch too.
Yeah, sometimes we get people pulling over to watch on the highway. I mean, they have the electronic signage out that says caution, smoke, prescribed fire ahead. But that was just neat because you can kind of see those three burns on the landscape. Let's see. This is a really good, so this is how a wetline's applied. So this is our UTV, and we modified that to have a sprinkler system inside, so the front tires are mashing down the grass, and then our sprinkler is applying water, and then we have that's Bob Kremens. He works at RIT. He's a researcher out there. He's laying fire on the other side of the wetline, so that's kind of a visual that works. This is at Iroquois Wildlife Refuge, which is by Batavia, New York. This is a burn This is the Fido burn, which is right back here. And some of the more extreme fire behavior we'll get on a burn. Sometimes these motor fuels really grip. Let's see. Here's Dylan. Laying fire down in another mode unit. This was Andromeda. This is back to Fido, the one behind the center here, and you can see this was one where we mowed the scrub oak, and this is a mow and burn. We're looking to consume all of that slash, and that's what we're doing here, so we can plant afterwards with our seed drill. Same burn, different spot. It's Jesse. This was the Altona Flat Rock fire. State Police flies Huey helicopters there. They were doing bucket drops. Here's Todd, fire tech at Albany Pine Bush. We're really happy to have Todd. He's not here today, but Todd was volunteering with us since 2016 and hadn't missed a burn, and he's a retired state trooper. So he has a whole lifetime of experience, and he's an EMT too, so he's a great member of the team. Also, shout out to Sean, that's our other fire tech back there. So more flat rock pictures. And I threw this one on here just to show you guys, this is a typical burn for us. This was the cupcake burn in May over on Willow Street. I think we had 14 people here with us that day. Paul Russell, and that's his son Matt. We had 2 forest rangers, Thomas from New York State Parks, Steve Jackson, fire tech, and then the rest of the guys and girls are volunteers. Josh is a school resource officer in Albany. A lot of them take the day off of work just to come help with the burn. So we got a great team. There's Paul, you guys know Paul. This is what it looked like after that burn. This is also out on Willow Street. We're doing some mop up here. That's Dylan. Let's see, I got just a couple more videos to show you. This is the Gherkin burn over by Crossgates Mall. Just kind of what it looks like from above. We're trying to ignite the unit in a manner that creates a lot of convection. We want that smoke column to pop up and out. We want a steady wind direction that's going to blow it away from sensitive areas, but not an overwhelming wind that'll shear the column off and blow it back down to the surface. I guess I got. This is the Altona wildfire, and there's like knee-high heath underneath that jack pine, and it really rips. So that's what that one was. And my last video was just that. This is a corner out in the Andromeda unit, and they were back in there the day after the fire. I was out there. They were all over the place, and there's pockets of lupin. It's a pretty lush plant, so sometimes the pockets don't totally consume in the fire, and there's lupin in all the units around, so we'll only burn a third of a subpopulation at a time, so the rest can recolonize it. Anybody have any questions about? Yes?
So I have a weird question that's kind of oddball, sorry. So I'm thinking a lot about climate change because it's 70% of what I'm working on lately. And, the state is thinking about passing even more strong rules about emissions, which is great, from all of the sectors across the economy. And I'm wondering what scientists, like the folks who work here and in other places that use fire as a management tool, are doing as you're thinking about like the carbon that's released from these burns, and whether there's any calculating going on about that carbon that's sequestered as the ecosystem is restored. Obviously with wildfire management, you're avoiding big releases because you're avoiding those mega fires, but is there any thought about carbon emissions and the fire management going on here in the Pine Bush?
There is, but Can I deflect to Neil for that?
Yeah, no, there's been some great research on this, and in particular, it all depends on the fire rotation. So actually, the lower intensity, more frequent burns at the right timing release less carbon than wildfires. And you're actually resequestering, a bunch of studies have shown this, you're resequestering more carbon than you actually release in the fire if you're waiting enough years until the next fire, especially in situations like this. So basically, when it burns, the plant, you're releasing all that carbon to the atmosphere, but the subsequent regrowth, because we're not killing the trees, we're not killing the scrub oak and things when we do this. All that regrowth, after just 2 seasons in these kinds of environments, it's resequestered more carbon than you actually released in the fire. Yeah. No, because of concerns about climate change, there's a lot of research going on in that arena. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah? Anybody else? Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No? So I just to reiterate, June 14th, right? Yeah, June 14th, the scheduled date for the audit committee will be open for the entire board, and we'll get communication out, like a mini board packet, a week in advance for that. And Lisa and I will work with Wojcicki to have Frank join us.
Chris, just to be clear, every audit committee meeting is open to anybody who wants to attend.
Thank you. Yes, audit committee meetings are the Friday prior to every board meeting, and they are open to anyone. Elaine, you joined us for a couple.
Once, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
You know, before we do that, I want to commend our neighbors for your thoughts before. It's much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Our relationship with our neighbors is really important, and given whether it's fire or thinning or any other method of management, it's important that our neighbors are part of that process and all that kind of thing. So thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Second? All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you.